Hello, welcome, my name's Andy and welcome to this next flipped preaching video. This week we're back into Luke, back on the Gospels after our little tour through Colossians. So this week we're going back into the normal run of the lectionary, and we're looking at a really interesting story, and it's one that's always troubled me. So it's Luke 16:19 to 31, and it's an old story which Jesus is retelling. It's a story about a man who is incredibly rich, and he has a man who kind of lives at the gates of his house who's incredibly poor, and the poor man is named Lazarus, and they both die. Lazarus goes somewhere, we don't really quite know where, heaven I suppose. The rich man, who doesn't get a name, goes somewhere else, and the rich man kind of tries to still order people around and order Lazarus to come and touch his tongue and quench the pain. And the moral of the story is, no, you can't, it's been fixed, Lazarus can't help you, you've cast your die, you've made your bed, you've got to lie in it, there's no way that Lazarus can help. And so the rich man says, can you send back Lazarus to the earth to warn my brothers? And the message is, nope, they've had the prophets, they've had the scriptures, and they wouldn't believe even if someone went back from the dead. Okay, so I've always found a bit of a trouble with this passage because it's got a view of the afterlife which doesn't seem to hold true for me. I've always wrestled with its portrayal of what we interpret as heaven and hell. So I want to try and explain some of my own processing with this video, and this text, and where I think it might be coming from. Now the thing is, I said it was an ancient story, and it was old by the time that Jesus told it, and we've actually recovered the original one. It was an Egyptian story, and the details don't matter, but broadly the story existed in its almost entirety way earlier than Jesus. So he was retelling a story. So some of the details in it are a bit weird. When Lazarus dies and goes somewhere else, it says that he goes to the bosom of Abraham, which is a very unusual way of describing it. There are all sorts of details which make us think that this was something that Jesus was telling. He was retelling a popular story, a well-known story. It's a bit like if I were to tell you a story about two children who wander in the woods and they find a house made of gingerbread. You don't necessarily question the fact that you don't get gingerbread houses, it's just part of the story. And likewise, Jesus is telling a story to make a point. Now I've looked at lots of commentaries on this passage, and all of the people agree that we can't use this as a guide to the afterlife. We can't use this as a guide to heaven and hell because it doesn't match anything else that we're told happens afterwards. So I guess that's one of the messages. When you read this is not describing what happens when we die. That some people go to a kind of heavenly place, some people go to a hell place where there's torment. It's not saying that. That's not the purpose of it. What is the purpose? I think there are two. Not just me, but the people who are experts in this think there are two. The first one is kind of obvious. This man was incredibly rich and he couldn't notice the poverty that was on his doorstep. It says that this rich man clothed himself with purple and linen. Both of those are signs that he was extraordinarily wealthy. And it says that he ate sumptuously, he feasted every day. Now even the rich people back then would only feast once every few weeks when they had a special occasion, but he had a feast every day. He was extraordinarily wealthy, and he just didn't see that there was somebody, a human being, at the end of his gates, who needed his help. He just ignored him. Even at the end of the parable, when he's caught out, by, he's made to face up for his own wrongdoing in life, his own selfishness. His plea to Abraham, not God interestingly, but his plea to Abraham is to send a messenger back so that his brothers don't make the same mistake. He's only really interested in his own. After all of this, he still only can see that he wants to help out his brothers. He's not interested in other people who are poor. He wants to stop his brothers falling into the same trap. So he's selfish through and through, right the way to the end. So that's one message, that when we're wealthy, we can be blind to the needs of others. And that's a message that I know I need to hear. And if you've got the means to watch this on a video, you're probably quite wealthy too in the grand scheme of things, worldwide, globally. Therefore you probably need to hear this too. We need to have eyes to see the poverty that exists in this world and not just be blind to it. The second thing is, of course, that he wanted Lazarus to go back from the dead, and there's the line that, well, you wouldn't, even if someone did go back from the dead, they wouldn't be believed. Now, Lazarus, we think there's a tie into John's Gospel here, where you have Lazarus, Jesus' friend, who died and was brought back to life, and soon after that was what caused the Jewish authorities to want Jesus executed. So there's perhaps a recognition that Lazarus did come back from the dead. A different Lazarus, granted, but the same name, did come back from the dead, and still people didn't respond. Still people didn't get it, that death had been overcome. And of course later Jesus would come back from the dead, and again people don't always get it. So I guess our message is twofold. A, we've got to recognise our wealth and be compassionate to those who have less. And B, we've got to recognise that Jesus did come back from the dead. That changed everything. It changed everything. Death is defeated, and we need to live accordingly. Okay, thank you for watching. I wonder what you make of this story. Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.